We have passed the tipping point on carbon emissions, and it is too late to do anything about climate change. Measures that could possibly be implemented would take too long and would not pull us out of this hole that we have gotten ourselves into. The tipping point is a point of no return. In the past 100 years, the Earth's temperature has risen 1 degree Fahrenheit. Although this may not sound like much, 1 degree has affected the Earth in immense ways. Sea levels are rising due to glaciers and the Arctic sea melting. Temperatures in the lake are rising, which increases algal blooms and throws off the balance in lake habitats and lowers lake levels. Heavier rainfall is causing floods in many regions, which we've all witnessed here with the floods across Texas. High temperatures are also increasing droughts, causing crops to wither. Hurricanes, too, have increased in frequency and in strength. Overall, climate change is altering the ecosystems that have been so successful for many years. The way that I picture it is a small snowball starting at the top of a mountain. As it rolls down the hill, it only grows in size and seriousness. The snowball grows as it picks up speed down the mountain and eventually turns into an avalanche, causing detrimental effects. With climate change, we are in the beginning of the avalanche stage. Things are only going to get worse from here on out. If we were to pull ourselves out of this hole, we should have began years before, but instead we spent too much time debating whether or not climate change was even real. But the reality is, climate change is real, and it is a man-made crisis. Bill McKibben reported in an article titled The Tipping Point that this is not a future problem. We're already past the line out of the safe zone. We need to be scrambling like offside linemen to get back to where we belong before the whistle blows. And the line that we need to return to if we hope to avoid retching disruptions from global warming is 350 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Currently, we are at an alarming high rate of 500 and 600 parts per million. Could you imagine trying to come up with a plan that would work all over the world, that would be strong enough to slam on the brakes of carbon emissions and reduce them to 350 parts per million? McKibben also reported, "Forget the plans we've laid so far, which see us slowly easing up on the use of coal and ratcheting up the use of renewables, mostly by gradual shifts in the price of carbon. That might get us to 550, and it might possibly even get us somewhere near 450. It's like having high cholesterol. If you radically change your diet, it will fall, but you've got to do it before you die." Currently, the government is coming up with solutions. Benjamin Zischer described one of Obama's plans in The Inconvenient Truth About Climate Change Policy. He said, "If the Obama administration's climate action plan, a 17% reduction in U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by 2020 were implemented immediately, what temperature reduction would yield by the year 2100? The answer, 15 one-thousandths of a degree. That effect would be too small to even be measured, let alone affect sea levels and cyclones and all the rest." That number, by the way, is not some screwy calculation from the back of an envelope. It comes from the Environmental Protection Agency's own climate model. The Climate Action Plan would collapse as a regulatory framework because it is all cost and no benefit. China and the U.S. have also come up with a solution. Zischer wrote in the same article that the agreement calls for an additional 10% reduction by the U.S. by 2025, with no actual reduction by the Chinese. This additional cut in the U.S. emissions gets another temperature reduction of 1/100th of a degree. These numbers are real and they are alarming. It is going to take the whole world to agree on a plan and to take action to successfully save ourselves from even a few of the effects that we have brought on. What is even more alarming, though, is the extreme cost that goes into reducing only 1/100th of a degree. Laura Shin wrote in What Costs More, Preventing Climate Change or Dealing with the Effects, that paying up front to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and prevent further climate change would cost the world about $14 trillion a year. Does our government truly believe that this is progress, an efficient way to be spending all of our money? We are already seeing the detrimental effects of global warming. We have seen the truly unsuccessful rates of what the government believes to be the solution, and have gotten a sense of the ridiculously high cost it takes to kill this beast. The government and the world have yet to come up with a successful plan to stop this quick down spiral of global warming, and we have run out of time. We have already passed the point of saving ourselves and are headed down a road that is going to take us to a world we have never seen. A world with far less species, acidic oceans, constant natural disasters, and increasingly high temperatures. We have passed the tipping point on carbon emissions, and it is too late to do anything about climate change. Thank you.
But we're not. Why are we clapping? What?
Is it Aiden?
Sir.
Okay. Ready when you are.
Okay. Hold on. So I'd first like to ask you all, if you do believe that we are past the tipping point, do you just think that there should be no plan and we should just sit and worry?
I mean, if we came up with a plan, how are we going to successfully get the entire world to agree on it? And how do we have enough time to implement it to actually see these changes? Because in my research that I've done, all of the researchers say that we need to start reducing the carbon emissions and coming up with a plan by 2015. It's almost 2016. Like, we are pretty much out of time. We need to get on this and do it like 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
So yeah, I mean, if we could come up with a plan and do it, like, I'm all for it. But the costs and the time amount that we have, I just don't think that it's possible.
So what should we do?
What should we do?
Yeah, what's the plan? No
I
plan?
mean,
Should we just sit
no.
here and wait?
I say we have plans. The current plan that Obama has right now, let me tell you about it. Where is it?
So actually, I'd like to go ahead and change that up then. You were actually talking about how we're at 350 right now, and I'm more just asking.
No, 350 is where we want to be. We're not at 350.
Okay,
We're
so
like
what did you say we were at right now?
500, 600.
500 or 600. Because we actually, when is your article from that says that? Do you know the date? Like how recent would that be?
I can't find it. Actually, 2015.
2015.
So this year, yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, because we have very similar. We have a similar article. It's from very recent date as well that actually says something different, but that's totally fine. So you also said that in 100 years, we've increased by 1 degree. We actually have a lot of evidence that states that it should actually be 3 to 5 more degrees. It would be extreme. So in the past 100 years, obviously 1 degree is a lot, but if you think that it took that long to increase only by 1 degree, do you think that it's so extreme that it can't be fixed because it still has a few more degrees to go, which isn't the best idea?
Well, the way that I see it is we didn't even the parts per million in the atmosphere didn't really get bad until recent times. The 100 years goes back, we weren't doing that bad with our carbon emissions, but until recently we've been pumping all of those into the atmosphere. And it can't be fixed, it can only be stabilized because it's already in the atmosphere. There's not really a way that we can remove it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have research that says, where is it in there that says, your part that says it can't change? It's not going to reduce global warming. An immediate cut of around 60 to 70% would only stabilize and not fix anything or reverse.
The effects of global warming?
Yeah.
So you think that one way or another, it's just, we're done?
I mean, I feel like we kind of did it to ourselves.
No, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with that. I'm more just saying, do you think that we're truly just done?
I mean, I'm right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't
Armand.
read your name. What?
Armand.
Okay. What's your last name?
Shikari.
Thanks. Okay, ready when you are.
All right. We negate the resolution that we are past the tipping point for carbon emissions, and we can't do anything to fix the problem of carbon emissions. We define a tipping point as a point of radical and irreversible harms from one state into another. A tipping point for carbon emissions would be a point at which, with a certain amount of carbon emissions, we would shift from a thriving planet into a dying planet without the ability to go back. We will be making 3 arguments. First, that a tipping point doesn't exist for carbon emissions. Second, if there was a tipping point that we have not yet passed. And third, that if we have passed the tipping point, we can still change things back for the better. A key observation to note is that the affirmative team must be refuting all 3 of our 4 arguments in order to affirm the resolution. For example, it wouldn't matter if once past the tipping point, there's no turning back. If we show that we're not past the tipping point, or if a tipping point didn't exist in the first place. This means that if we're providing at least one of our arguments true, then that's sufficient for you to negate the resolution. Argument 1, a tipping point doesn't exist. There are 3 things to look at when seeing if something has a tipping point or not. From Book et al., the first type of response is being proportional to the magnitude of the driver, thus exhibiting a smooth response pattern. In the second class of ecosystem change, the response is amplified by internal synergistic feedbacks, and thus becomes nonlinear. The third class involves nonlinearity, but exhibits hysteresis, in which at least 2 stable states exist, implying limited reversibility. The term tipping point applies to the second and third class. We can use these criteria to see that there is no tipping point for carbon emissions. From Book et al. Again, rising atmospheric greenhouse gas concentrations and the climate change they cause can act as a global driver of changes in biodiversity. However, local and regional ecosystems vary considerably in their responses to climate change. Most climatic variations that drive ecosystem responses are likely to change heterogeneously across the terrestrial biosphere. Atmospheric CO2 changes driven by biotic changes are far lower and slower than the current rates of anthropogenic CO2 inputs. Hence, the heterogeneity and the independence of ecosystem responses and the spatially variable changes in the specific climate drivers indicate that the biospheric response would tend to be gradual, without a global tipping point at any specific level of change. Argument 2. We aren't past the hypothetical tipping point. Leading environmental scientists have predicted that a potential tipping point for carbon emissions could be, from James Hansen, the level of carbon dioxide at which we will set in motion unstoppable changes is at most 450 parts per million. Carbon dioxide has increased 280 parts per million to 383 parts per million in 2007, and is now increasing about 2 parts per million per year. We must make significant changes within a decade to avoid setting in motion unstoppable climatic changes. Recent environmental studies have shown that we have yet to pass that point. From Joby Ward, the World Meteorological Organization, in an annual accounting of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere, reported that average levels of carbon dioxide exceeded 400 parts per million in the early months of 2015, a rise of 43% over pre-industrial levels. This shows that we have yet to cross the tipping point of carbon emissions. Argument 3, we still can help the environment. James Hansen outlines a 4-step solution to the carbon emission problem. Hence, we could reach 450 parts per million within 2 or 3 decades. We should be inspired now to change our energy systems. The following is a 4-point strategy to avoid dangerous climate change. 1. Coal and unconventional fossil fuels must be curtailed and used only with capture and sequestration of the carbon dioxide underground. Existing coal-fired power plants should be phased out over the next few decades. 2. Carbon dioxide and efficient standards must be implemented. The price can be via tax ration and trade system, or a combination of methods. This will make fossil fuels pay for environmental damage while stretching remaining oil and gas to accommodate sustainable economic growth. In addition, we need real efficiency standards for vehicles, buildings, and lighting. 3. We must take steps to draw down atmospheric carbon dioxide. Biofuel power plants with carbon sequestration can draw down atmospheric carbon dioxide, putting anthropogenic carbon dioxide back underground. 4. We must take steps to reduce other non-carbon dioxide forcings, especially black soot, methane, and ground-level ozone via stricter regulations. There we go.
He has to go to work.
Okay.
The camera's running though.
Is somebody else gonna do the timing, or?
I don't know if B-Lane sent anyone.
Okay.
You want me to do it?
Would you mind?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. 3 minutes for this?
Possibly should.
Yes.
Cool. Sorry.
I'm good.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Will you give the time signals and then? Okay.
you got it?
Thank you.
All right, well, before I start asking questions, I just want to say, like, I am all for saving the world and everything that we can do. But my true question is, like, the things that you brought up in your argument, how much effect do these really have on it? Or did you have evidence that show how much effect these have?
Well, they will help because if we do stop carbon dioxide emissions, like through coal burning or any other gas burning, we haven't done them yet. We need to.
Yeah, we haven't done them yet, you're right. And we really don't have much time. And you said that you don't really think the tipping point exists, but at some points you did say you thought it kind of exists. So can you clarify, do you or do you not think the tipping point exists?
We think it exists, but we just think we haven't passed it yet.
Okay, so if you think it exists, you're saying that we have just a small amount of time to fix these things. So if we haven't quite yet implemented these tactics, how are we going to implement them in time to get us out from not reaching?
Well, we said that we would hope that they would implement in the next few decades, so through passing laws and educating.
Okay, decades, so you don't think the tipping point is for maybe several years? Because all the information that we have found says 2015 and 2025. That's kind of like now.
Yeah, well, 2025 isn't now.
You're right,
It's
but
10 years.
2015 is.
Yeah, well, through our research, we found that the tipping point isn't gonna be here until a couple decades.
Okay, so you're hoping that in a couple decades, we could phase out a couple power plants, get some biofuel power plants, and hopefully we'll be okay.
Well, we can help the problem. We're not saying that there isn't a problem, we just say that the problem isn't as imminent as y'all say,
All right.
and that we still have time to fix it.
Okay, and I feel like I haven't really gotten a clear answer yet, but with y'all's ideas of how we're gonna, go about fixing these things, what effect did you find that they really have? Because all of our information says that it's only gonna lower it 1/100th of a degree, which is basically nothing.
Well, we believe that the tipping point is movable and with carbon capture and that.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm wondering how much effect are these really gonna play? Are they really going to do enough to save us from global warming?
Well, we believe so because through just stopping.
But you don't have any evidence saying how much effect they have?
No.
Okay. I don't think I have any more questions.
Oh, wait, it's negative attack, right?
It should be, yeah.
It's not my turn, I apologize.
It's okay.
Give me 1 second.
Matt Dooley?
Yes, I will be doing the entire question. And just a second, as soon as I can pull it right.
So this one's fine.
Okay, everyone ready?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a few key things to note in their speech that makes their entire advocacy entirely imperilable. The first thing to note is that there's 3 things that are important to this resolution. 1, does a tipping point exist or not? They have no evidence within their case that counteracts the fact that we're showing within our case that per the criteria that makes what a tipping point is, such a tipping point doesn't exist for carbon emissions. This means that the resolution is immediately false and you can't actually affirm because no tipping point exists. This doesn't deny that there are bad effects that happen as we put more carbon dioxide into the air, but that doesn't mean that a tipping point specifically exists and that there are always ways to reverse the harms coming from it. So, at the very start of things, per our case, the resolution is false. But even if you don't buy that, you can go to the point where we're talking about how the tipping point exists at 450 parts per million, and we're only just now at 400. You're preferring our evidence over theirs because our evidence is coming from the World Meteorological Organization at the very beginning of 2015, which is going to be the most recent evidence available for the round. And you're going to be preferring our evidence showing that we're only just, like the tipping point is at at 450 parts per million, because this is coming from like in the late 2014 from like major like environmental scientists and stuff like that who have been leading the discussion about like when the tipping point is, what a tipping point is, and like how we actually go about solving it. This means this is going to be the most reliable evidence for us to actually rely on in this round. Just because they have numbers saying it's like 500, 600 parts per million that we're at right now doesn't make their like statistics actually true. Ours are more accurate and come from more reliable sources, thus they're preferable for you to prefer in this round. So we're not actually past the tipping point yet. So this is in two places which you negate the resolution. But even if you don't buy either of that, there's nothing within their case that's saying that like we can't actually take effects to like beat back the effects of global warming and stuff like that. You can look to our 4-point plan that we outlined from James Hansen about how exactly we can like reduce emissions and then pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, which lowers the amount of parts per million that are in the air. They just say that like some like environmental effects proposed by the U.S. and China to like reduce emissions would only like reduce things by like 1/100th of a degree, but this isn't specific to like what exactly we're talking about. We're not advocating for the plan set forth by the U.S. and China. We're advocating for this specific 4-part plan that reduces emissions and pulls carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So don't let them stand up in their next speech and just say, oh, you're not going to be doing enough work, because their statistics aren't specific to our advocacy. Moreover, even if you don't like the plan that we're outlining within our third contention, there's another way that we can solve this, and this is by curtailing the amount of fuel that the military is allowed to use in the United States. Currently, the United States is using a stupid amount of fuel, and like this is contributing to the climate crisis. Patricia Hines wrote that the United States Air Force is the single largest consumer of jet fuel in the world. The F-4 burns more than 1,600 gallons of jet fuel per hour and peaks at 14,400 gallons per hour at a supersonic speed. B-52 guzzles 500 gallons per minute. 10 minutes of flight uses as much fuel as the average driver does in 1 year of driving. A quarter of the world's jet fuel feeds the USAF fleet. In 2006, they consumed an astonishing 2.6 billion gallons of fuel. And this accounts for 5% of the total climate emissions in the entire world. Patricia Hines continues by saying that just how much petroleum the Pentagon includes is one of the best protected secrets in the government. The U.S. military consumes as much as 1 million barrels of oils per day and contributes 5% of current global warming emissions. Keep in mind that the military has 1.4 million active duty people, or 0.0002% of the world's population, and this generates 5% of climate pollution. And military fuel is very needed to fight against, because this is the worst possible type of pollution. It's worse than any kind of like average CO2 pollution. Patricia Hines continues by saying that military fuel is more polluting because of the fuel types used for aviation. CO2 emissions from jet fuel are larger, possibly triple per gallon, than those of diesel or oil. Further, aircraft with exhaust has unique polluting effects that result in greater warming effects per unit of fuel used. Radioactive effects from jet exhaust, including nitrous oxide, sulfur dioxide, soot, water vapor, exacerbate the warming effect of CO2 exhaust emissions. So we're providing multiple solutions to solve for the global warming process, and we're providing multiple ways that we can actually fix this. Even if like the tipping point does exist, and even if we're past it, these are ways that we can reduce the parts per million in the atmosphere and like actually get us back below the tipping point and reverse the harms of it. Their evidence isn't specific to the things that we are specifically advocating for fighting. So our methods are going to be working. So this round breaks down really easily. We're showing 3 different ways that the resolution is false. There's no tipping point, we're not past it even if there was, and we can still fight it. Thank you.
Doing questions?
Yes, I have questions. I'm Shannon Johnson. Okay, now the opening person said that you can make changes in a decade. You said you must make changes in the next couple of decades. That's inconsistent, so which is it?
Time frame doesn't really matter because the resolution is just saying, can we fix it? As long as like the ability to fix it is there, how long it takes shouldn't really matter.
Okay, and you also said like there would be a lot of cuts in like the when they had airplanes and all the pumping, we had a lot of very good,
Yeah, this was
imagery
from
and
the
stuff.
Patricia Hines evidence I was talking
Mhm.
about, how like the planes within our US air fleet
Yeah, I didn't get
consume
you,
like
but
a
like,
lot
how
of
much
fuel.
would that cost, like to cut all of that?
How much would it cost?
Yeah, how much do you think that would cost?
Wouldn't cutting aircraft and like stopping production of aircraft actually reduce the money we're spending?
You think so? Okay.
I mean, if I'm not gonna be spending money on like building aircraft and like hiring and training pilots, how would I be spending more money?
Okay. And you also said that we don't have proof for our story, or for our,
Well, my argument was that your arguments about how like the US and China deal to like reduce emissions would only like reduce like the temperature of the world by like 0.100th of a degree or something like that. But that argument isn't specific to what we're advocating for and how we're fixing the planet. We're not advocating for the US and China deal. We're advocating for the plan set forth by James Hansen, which is the 4-part plan of like reducing emissions and pulling carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and putting it into places that doesn't actually like contribute to global warming. So your evidence isn't specific to how we're actually fixing the problem. Does that make sense?
yeah, I get what you mean.
Okay.
All right, no further questions?
Okay, I'm Kayla Simpson. It's Kala.
Yeah, I'm just scrolling. It takes a while.
Good?
Yep.
Okay, I would first like to point out that we are not advocating what China and the US have done. That was merely an example on how the government has failed so far. I would